you know what? Maybe you're playing ahead too.
Hello, welcome back to From the Bedroom to Beatport, episode 3. First off, I messed up this morning. I spent about 3 hours recording and making new bits and pieces. And when I went to render it, I realised I hadn't set up the audio from Ableton properly. I don't know what I did. I was getting a lot of feedback and I was half asleep when I was doing it. I didn't record the audio, so all I did was record my voice. So I have all these bits done, basses and little bits and pieces, but I've no audio for it. So what I'm going to have to do is go back and just retrospectively take you through exactly what I did. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so the first thing I did was I just added in a few points, a few locators, so I know where I am. And I right-clicked on the top here, added in breakdown, build, and drop. If you've never done that before, just add your locator, right-click on it, and add locator, and blah blah blah. Yeah. Right. So then I wanted to EQ it a little bit better. Hang on, just let me make sure this is recording this time. Couldn't handle another one. This is actually my third time doing this now because the video didn't record for some reason on the second one. It is recording now. Right, I just EQ'd the wobbly thing bass because it wasn't working really. It was sounding weak-ish. So I went in and I just... All I did was add a formant to change that. Yeah, where is it? What the I added the second oscillator to a formant and I moved the intensity so it was in key, because obviously when you move it out, and I brought the amp on these two down to go halfway, so I brought it so it comes out more, and I dropped the third oscillator down an octave. It just gave it a more just a little bit stronger sounding, and I'm going to do more with that breakdown. Definitely, it's there's no identity. It's not really saying much to me at all. It seems to be just a nothing sort of intro at the minute. We'll do something with it. Right. So the next thing I did was the ARP that we done in FMA. I bounced that down to audio, so I have the ability to chop it up for the build. So when I went to the build, that was the first thing I did. I took the last eighth of a bar from that and I just looped it. So I had this. I added a filter to it over here. Swept it up, and I also swept the Q. So I swept the Q there, swept the Q from 54 to 214. That really made all the difference. Right, so we've done that. We have on the stutter still on, and the cave. So that just adds, that's a lot of background noise sitting underneath the build. Okay, so that was that. I took out the wobbly thing from that. I might actually add a bit more of that in. Let me do that now, actually, seeing as we're going back and doing it again. I'll go back and do that in a second. Alright, next thing I did was I added in a snare. I'm not crazy about this, the arrangement of the notes, but we'll do some more in the mix then maybe. I did that. And then I just copied what I'd done on that down to the growl. On the growl, I just stretched out the notes so there's no breaks in it. So it's just one long pumping sort of sound. I added a filter on it, simple filter, and just swept it up. That was all I did with that. That was a snare, and then I went in and did a riser. So this is the riser I did. So we've got 4 things going on there. We've got a pitch rise. We've got an LFO rise. So basically starting a slow, wobbly thing up to quite fast. We've also got a white noise on it, and that's EQ'd down. So it's it's amped down to sweep on the amp. So it slowly brings it in. And there's a macro on the EQ, the high EQ, so it's like a filter effect on it. And I also added a filter on it as well. I was trying to get it with the EQ, but it wasn't good enough, so I added a filter at the end. So I'll just go in and show you there each individual part. Hang on. Doesn't matter what really sounds you use. You can use anything. I added a formant. I like to have that high bit in. Standard square saw with a bend plus and a sync, that hard sync. It's a nice sound to it, normal spectrum sound. I dragged the first one down to 7, and the other 2 are at 12. You can knock them up and down a little bit if you want. So the first one, I dragged an envelope 1 over to all the pitches, and then I dragged. No, I didn't. What am I talking about? I dragged the macro over to the pitches. And I pulled them all up to 24. Then I mapped that to a macro here, and I did a sweep up. So that's the sweep I did from the bottom to the top. Simple. Yeah, that's all I did with that. You can copy those settings if you want. I added on some modulation oscillator with the ring modulator on 1 at about 11 o'clock, phase modulator on 2 at about 10 o'clock, and the position on 2 at about 10 o'clock as well. And I added a filter. It's a DAF filter with the cutoff at about 2 o'clock. And the LFO, this is going to give you the pump sound. So your LFO, dragged it up, done it there, that's just setting. And I dragged macro 2 over to the rate. The rate is off sync, brought the rate all the way down, and dragged the macro 2 all the way up. So this, with it off, hang on, with it off, you get this. Alright, and with it on, drag it back over to reignite. Right, macro 3 was the white noise, if I'm right. Yeah, drag the macro 3 over to white noise, had the amp all the way down, drag the macro all the way up, and just done a sweep on that as well. So start that about halfway at 66 and drag that all the way up. And I've done it on the EQ as well, which you don't really need to do that because you're going to use an auto filter. So just auto filter, same thing, filter sweep on the auto filter like you would normally do. And that was it for that. I added a dimension expander. Google it, I think it's free. Dimension expander, riser. What else? I added an auto pan on around the head, and I brought the amount down to 50, so it's not cutting. It's not. It won't be like if you bring it up full. It's too choppy. About 50. And that was it for that. Right. I think that's all I did, wasn't it? Yeah, I added in a few kicks at the start, so I'm gonna bring them out a bit more in the mix down. Yeah, and that was it. I added a little vocally bit at the end as well. It's not what I'm gonna go with, but it'll do it for the time being. So as you come to the end of that drop, you cut out the last eighth of a bar. Okay, and then I done a lead. I said I needed a lead bit. So before we had So the lead was, I stopped the video, went and done it, and then I come back and I went to explain it. But this is what I did. Just out of the scrapyard, band plus, brought it up to 24, intensity all the way down. Square saw, band plus. There's just copy those settings. I added a formant again. Had the volume about there. Modulation oscillator. This makes all the difference for this sound, the modulation. It's really that ring modulator, number 1. Have it up till about 3 o'clock. You can stick a bit on the phase, number 2. That'll be it. A little bit of white noise, a bit of amp, a bit of sample and hold, and a bit of bit crush. Stuck on a DAF filter on LFO5. Brought the waveform slightly left. Have my setting. That's my setting there for how much I put on it. Mix all the way up. The volume on the filter about 11, and the amp up to about there as well. Added some chorus with these settings, and dimension expander, fairly small, a little bit of a dry wet. Brought the low shelf down, a little bit of boost and a little bit of high shelf, and that was it. Right, I copied that then, the actual note sequence, and I brought it up to my sub bass. I just done a simple sub bass, 2 oscillators, one lower than the other, on sine square. Turned the higher one down to about 11 o'clock and the other one up full, and that was it. I had a little bit of bit warmth, and I brought that down to about 26. Standard side chain compression. Multi-band dynamics just to boost the lows. The mid shouldn't be boosted too much, and a limiter, and that was it really. I added an extra little bass in as well. All that is just a normal sine square, but bend minus those positions to just one oscillator, and it just adds a little bit of extra in the mids, in around about 300 hertz. You'll barely even notice it in the mix, but you'll notice if it isn't. And that's it. That's all we did for that. Right, so I'm sorry I screwed up, but it was an awful lot quicker. If you've any questions, just leave it in the comment and I'll answer anything you need to know about this. But what I did, so let's have a listen to the whole thing. Go to the start. So next week we'll do more variation on that drop. Now it's just a loop at the minute, but we'll do some extra little bits and try and make it a song. So next week I'll do something a little bit better. Yeah, leave a comment if you need anything else explained, and I'll talk to you next week. This is Damien Groove.